Well, we can just start things off with some introductions. I'm Kelly Spaven Silvermans. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Events and Donor Relations Coordinator at KU Libraries. I'm here today with my colleagues.
Hi, I'm Nikki, and I use she, her pronoun. Oh, I forgot my last name. I'm sorry. I'm Nikki Purge, and my pronouns are she, her. And I am the art director at KU Libraries.
We like that.
And then, sorry, I muted it for a second because I wanted to make sure I didn't get feedback from the Facebook stream because I'm managing that. So if you said something to me, sorry. But anyway, I am Michelle Lang. I'm the Senior Director of Alumni Programs and Event Services for the KU Alumni Association. It's nice to meet you, Lisa.
So nice to meet you all. And yes, thank you.
All right, perfect. Well, everybody, this is Lisa Barr. She's the author of our summer read, Women on Fire. And Lisa is the New York Times bestselling author of Women on Fire, obviously, and several other amazing novels. Lisa's also served as an editor for the Jerusalem Post, managing editor of Today's Chicago Woman, managing editor of Moment magazine, and as an editor and reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. Lisa's been featured on Good Morning America and The Today Show for her work as an author, journalist, and blogger. She lives in the Chicago area with her husband and her 3 daughters, which she calls lovingly, I'm sure, Drama Central. We're super excited to have Lisa with us here today to answer some questions about Women on Fire and discuss the book. So Michelle has a quick announcement for us, and then we'll get started with some questions.
Yeah, so just so everyone knows, we're live streaming this on our Facebook group page as well, our Jayhawk Book Club page. So if you're watching on Facebook and you have questions, you can put them in the comments on the Facebook stream, or if you're on here and you have a question or comment, you can pop it into the chat on this and we can relay it as well. So feel free to ask questions or whatever. It's an open discussion, and I'm sure Lisa will have tons of stuff to share with us. So I just wanted to let everybody know kind of the easiest way to do that, so it's not just everybody trying to shout things out. But let's go ahead and get started, I think.
Perfect. All right. Well, our first question for you, Lisa, is what inspired you to write Woman on Fire? And was the painting at the center of the book based on a real work of art?
So this is my 3rd novel. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. And best friends of ours, all 4 of their kids went to Kansas. And so, yes, so they were I told them, I said, look what I'm doing today, and kind of bragging about it. So anyway, thank you for having me here. So I wrote this book, as I mentioned, my 3rd novel during COVID lockdown. So I had my first book is called Fugitive Colors, and it's about stolen art. My second book is called The Unbreakables, which is kind of very sexy women's fiction. And I decided for this book that I really wanted to write something that I love to write and read. So I kind of threw in the whole kitchen sink. So very interesting. At the publishing house, I'm with HarperCollins, they didn't quite know how to categorize it because it's historical fiction, suspense, passion, risky journalistic pursuits, and strong, fiery women. And so I was working, I would say 7 days a week, 10 hours a day for 9 months. And I wanted to go back to a place in time which I loved. And, COVID was so dark and so many things were pretty scary. I wanted to really write about something I could just kind of deep dive into. So when I was a young reporter, I was in Jerusalem. So I was covering everything from, interviewing presidents and prime ministers to covering terrorism. And at that point, it was before kids. I have 3 daughters. And I was at the point in my life where I would say, take any assignment, do anything. It was yes, yes, yes. And I didn't think of consequences. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if I have a young protagonist, Jules Roth, who's 24 years old, sort of a savvy young journalist who thinks she knows everything and is going to make a lot of wrong turns. And I would be able to guide her at the end, taking in, being seasoned and old and jaded. And, I would be able to kind of give her my wisdom at the end. Another thing was going on at the same time. In all my books, there's a news hook or a news angle that comes from being a journalist for almost 30 years. And I had read this story, and it's called the Munich Art Hoard. What it is, in 2013, in a rundown, dilapidated apartment in Munich, there was discovered 1,500 masterpieces worth $1.5 billion. And I thought, and it turns out that this apartment belonged to a man named Cornelius Gurlitt, who was a recluse, and it turns out that he was the son of Hildebrand Gurlitt, who was Hitler's right-hand art thief. So I thought to myself, what if I began the book, without giving away any spoilers, where my unscrupulous art dealer is going to rob this treasure trove of books? Is it a crime to rob the robber? And so with that, things started to take off. And that's where I kind of began and what inspired the book.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So there's also, it sounds like an incredible amount of research that goes into planning a book like this. Can you kind of talk about what your method to your madness is, and how you prepared to write Woman on Fire?
Yes. So method to my madness. Have we got all day? Anyway, for my first book, just to give you an idea, it's also about stolen art. It's called Fugitive Colors, but it's from the perspective of the artist. When I was writing that book, I researched for almost 4 years, where I traveled to Europe. I did extensive interviews, and I really educated myself in Nazi looted art, stolen art. And so by the time I got to this book, I had a really strong base, but there was a lot to unpack. And so as far as my research, I love surrounding myself with piles of books and interviews, and I'm a research geek, and I love to deep dive in and find lots of nuggets of truth that I can put into the book. Like, one fact that comes to mind was adding in the small detail about Hugo Boss, that he was the one who designed the uniforms for the Nazis, and different things like that you start to uncover when you're doing research. And I just realized I didn't answer one of your first questions. The painting is a fictitious painting, but the artist, Ernst Engel, is a composite of real artists, and it's what we call an Easter egg. He's in my first book, and he's the teacher of Expressionist art and the founder of Expressionist art, who's murdered by the Nazis, and this is his last known painting, Woman on Fire. So it's an Expressionist work of art made up in my own head, but inspired by Expressionist art. So back to the research. So if you come to my house, I literally, because it's history, I lay everything out very much like my protagonist, Jules Roth, in note cards and sticky notes and everything. So it's my kitchen table with the eaves pulled out, my dining room table with the eaves pulled out, and you can go to my Instagram, there's pictures of it. It's crazy town. And basically it's there for about 2 weeks, and my poor family is relegated to the coffee table by the TV, and they know it. And after about 2 weeks and it all sinks in, I gather up the cards, I push them aside, and then I start writing. And so then I'm kind of a hybrid of these, plotters versus pantsers. Plotters are those writers who plot every detail. They sit down, they have an outline, very organized. And the pantsers among us fly by the seat of our pants, and we just get into the book and we start writing, and the characters take it away. And so I'm kind of a hybrid, but I do extensive research. And when you're writing about history, especially the Holocaust, I'm very meticulous in my research. And having come from an investigative journalist background, I'm, very careful to make sure I get the facts right.
Oh, that's actually a perfect transition to my next question, which is how has your background in journalism impacted your fiction, and what is it like shifting from journalist to author?
Well, I never really shift because when I was writing, now it's kind of flip flopped. But when I was working on my manuscripts, I was a full time journalist by day and writing my fiction at night. And now it's sort of flip flop. I'm full time writing, and I now before I worked at newspapers and magazines and contributed to lots of different publications. But now I write full time and I contribute essays, but really most of them are related to the book that I'm working on in some aspect. So I always say that it's a blessing and a curse because while a lot of my friends say who write historical fiction, they might have 5 sources to establish a fact and they call it a day. But not me. I will have 20 sources, and until it's on repeat and I'm seeing it over and over, then I know I've got my fact right. So I think sometimes it makes me a slower writer than a lot of my friends who might put out a new book every year. I'm not in every book putter, putting it out a new book every year. I'm sort of on the 2 year plan. And that's okay with me. I kind of really dig the research part, but it's a lot. Yeah, that's the method to my madness.
Excellent. So you shared with us, me and Kelly, that your father is a Holocaust survivor. So what drew you to this aspect of the Holocaust history, and why is it so important to raise awareness about it?
Yeah, so my dad is a Holocaust survivor, and he was very young when he came to this country, 13, and he kind of came here with nothing, literally nothing, and he rose through education and became a prominent ophthalmologist. Very self-made man, and so he. It was kind of interesting, growing up in suburbia, uh, you know, I had this dad with an accent and a history that none of my friends had, that same background. But it really, and I would say also that my dad's mother, my grandmother, who I dedicated this book to, was my best friend. She's the voice in my head. I loved her. And she, her whole family perished in Auschwitz, her parents and all her siblings, aunts and uncles. And yet, she was a woman filled with joy. And that's how she chose to live her life and what she gave to her legacy. And she also taught me to fight for things and to stand up for my Judaism, especially now in a time with surging anti Semitism. I have to use my platform and stand up. And so I learned a lot of that from my grandmother. And so the Holocaust background definitely impacts me. I mean, my first book has it, not my second book. And, I was a journalist where I covered lots of mainstream stories, but I also was a reporter, as you know, in Jerusalem for 7 years. So I covered a lot of stories there. It really impacts just how I live my life and what I write, how I raise my kids, and sort of the messages I want to get across. So for me, this book, it's a great feeling for me, especially if I'm speaking to a non-Jewish crowd and they come away with learning something about stolen art or that piece of history, and so I know. My goal is not to hammer history over your head, but to kind of teach things through a page turner. And I really love having, especially with my book clubs, intimate conversations about this question, this subject. But it really does dictate, or, really what I take through everything in my life, I would say.
Absolutely. Thank you. Um, so if we think about the characters of Woman on Fire, I think it's pretty clear that you write wonderful, empowered female characters. Um, like Jules,
Thank you.
Margot, Elizabeth, Lillian. So how does each woman in the story use her own power to impact the plot? Kind of while paving her own path at the same time.
So yes, so it's interesting. First of all, did everyone read the book? I don't want to create any spoilers or anything like that. If you didn't, it's totally fine. I just don't want to ruin it for people. So, have people read the book, or
I
did you
think
not?
so. We've been
Okay, I'll just kind of do it in a larger sense.
Sure.
So, as you know, I explained a little bit about Jules and her background, and I wanted to create sort of a savvy young journalist who's going to make a lot of wrong turns. I wanted her to go face to face with a very seasoned art dealer who would look at Jules and say, okay, no competition here. This young girl is no match for me. And so I wanted to kind of showcase how they were each going to learn through their journeys. Obviously, Margot de Laurent, this, psychopath art dealer, had a lot to learn, but her soft spot, if you will, was really connected to the painting, because it was the one thing her grandfather, the one person in her life who really cared for her, loved in terms of art more than anything. And, you have Jules's mother, a single mom, teaches Jules lots of things along the way. And you have Lillian, who's actually based on my grandmother, and also a strong woman, a survivor. And so, in my mind, although Jules is the protagonist, the main character, kind of leading the story, in my mind, really, it's Woman on Fire herself, the painting, and all the other characters sort of wrap around her. So I would say there's 5 women in this book that really, carry the story. And I just wanted to showcase how each woman grows and through this painting, and each woman will go after it and on their own terms. And so that was really important to me with creating these strong female characters.
Absolutely. So, Woman on Fire is an example of expressionist art. And so, expressionism is defined by how a painting makes you feel. Why were the expressionists terrorized by the Third Reich more than any other movement of art, do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, many of you know that, or if you don't, that Hitler was actually an artist before he became Hitler. He was rejected twice from the Academy of Fine Arts in Austria, and those rejections were devastating for him. And in order to survive, he was painting postcards on the street. I mean, just imagine, had life turned out differently. And so for him, in 1933, when he took power, before he went after the Jewish people and after, gypsies and homosexuals and communists and everyone who didn't line up with the Aryan ideals, the first group he went after were the artists, and it was almost a payback. So what was happening at the time in Germany? Hitler's art was, just backing up, was rejected because it was classical, and they felt like it was almost has been, old, not the it art that was happening at the time. And the it art was this, avant-garde, the expressionists, which were homegrown German expressionists, which began in the 1920s. And basically, it is how, as you had mentioned, ooh, my light just flew off, how art makes you feel. And so this is art that you might have people as purple, skies that are, green. Everything was sort of frenetic, wild brushstrokes that made you feel. And so the Nazis, this was not very Aryan and organized and classical. So this was art that they felt inspired, um, you know, Germany in the wrong direction. And so they actually called it degenerate art that was deplorable, unacceptable. And so, and the thing is, this art was fetching big dollars abroad, this artwork. And so the Nazis were very smart, and they basically, confiscated and looted or destroyed upwards of 600,000 works of art, expressionist, and surreal art, all types of art under the avant-garde category. But what they did is they took the best of it, the most valuable pieces, and we're talking the levels of Picasso, and they sold it with the help of Switzerland anonymously in auctions that people, museums from all over the world anonymously bought all these major artworks, and the profits from these sales went to fund the Nazi war machine, and so that's how it worked.
Okay, well, making kind of a hard turn into a different theme in the novel. As we've been kind of discussing it in our group, we've noticed that revenge is a powerful theme. Every character kind of deals with it in their own way.
I think I lost it.
Okay. We're just talking about like revenge as a theme in the novel, and how every character kind of deals with it. Sometimes taking it a little too far in some cases. So why is that the price tag of revenge worth it to some of them?
So I feel like you're hitting on a major theme in the book. And wait, it says my connection. Okay. Can you hear me, or can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So the characters are sort of divided between the pursuit of justice or the pursuit of revenge. And what happens is not everyone is good all the time. And so there's like a crisscross that, for example, Jules or Dan, for example, when it goes too far. And Margot, for sure, the art dealer, she will take the revenge too far. So there's that fine line between the pursuit of justice and the hunt for revenge. And so at different points in the story, all the characters are crossing the lines back and forth.
All right. So I have all the questions there. Like, we hear that you actually had a personal story that you gave to one of the characters in Woman on Fire. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, yeah. So as I mentioned, Jules Roth is, of all the characters I've ever created, probably the most me of any of my characters. And I decided I wanted to give her my personal backstory. So when I was 17, I was on an internship program for our state senate for 6 months. I lived in Springfield, and I interned for a state senator there. And I was approached at the time by a special law enforcement unit to see if I'd be willing to be used as bait to help break a sex trafficking ring. And of course, at that time, you didn't need your parental consent for anything, different times. And I said, yes, sign me up. And so and there were no cell phones or anything like that. So it was all in real time. And I was used as bait. We lured the bad guys in, and men were arrested. And it was a big moment for me as a high schooler and a young person. And I really knew that I was going to be a journalist in that moment, that I was going to do whatever it took to, expose the truth. And, it was a real moment for me. And I decided to give Jules that background in the book.
Oh, that's incredible. Wow. I remember reading that and just thinking like how major that was. I had no idea that was based on a a real story. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. So, this is one of my personal questions that I'm really excited to talk to you about. Um, you mentioned to us that Sharon Stone has optioned the rights to Woman on Fire to make a film. So tell us all about that, when it might be happening, and everything that you can share.
All right. So, yes, so that happened. So, just a little, do you want me to tell you how it all came to be? Just
Ooh,
like,
yeah.
so back, yeah, okay. So, before a book becomes a book, it's called an ARC, an advanced reader's copy. And this ARC is sent out, and it has all our mistakes in it, all the edits that still need to be edited, and I'm mortified. I'm like, how are you sending this out? But it's kind of in order to garner pre-book publicity. They send this out probably 4 to 5 months before the book comes out. And so I had these arcs, and two things happen at once. So I don't know if you noticed, but during COVID, a lot of celebrities wrote their biographies or their memoirs. And so you had Matthew McConaughey, Demi Moore, Gabriel Byrne, lots of celebrities. So Sharon Stone wrote her book called The Beauty of Living Twice. And so many of us know Sharon as, sort of the it girl of the 80s and 90s and Basic Instinct. But she had a really interesting backstory. And among the details, she had a major like brain aneurysm and stroke, and she was given 1% chance to live. And it took her 7 years to fight back, and she did. And I thought, wow, this is really incredible. And then at the same time, I'm sure authors have these blurbs where they have writers. If you look at the cover of the book, there's a blurb on the cover of mine is an author named Mary Kubica, who's wonderful, and she writes fantastic thrillers. Anyway, they blurb your book a few lines of praise after reading your book. So an author named Kristen Harmel, who writes wonderful historical fiction. And the last line in her blurb for me was, Woman on Fire is woman in gold meets spotlight meets Basic Instinct. So I thought to myself, okay, this is happening. I'm going to send this arc to one celebrity. What the hell? I'm just going to do this. I'm sure it's going to be trashed, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I, through some sleuthing, I found Sharon's business manager's address, and I just sent her the arc. And I thought, okay, that's it. Nothing's going to happen, but I'm okay with it. So I sent it in October, middle of October, and it was November, and my husband and I were sitting on the couch watching Netflix like everybody else, and all of a sudden I get a text, and it said, hi, it's Sharon Stone. I'm in Dubai, and I'm reading your book and loving it. Has anyone optioned this? And I thought, oh my God. But really my first reaction was, one of those notes that was, hi, I'm in Barcelona and I lost all my money. Can you send, and then I remembered, I said, oh my God, I sent her my book, and she actually took it with her and she read it. And I was, I may not have been dancing on my couch. I was screaming. I was so excited. And very quickly afterward, on December 23rd, we signed a deal, and that she was going to produce and star in the film adaptation of Woman on Fire. So this was unimaginable, and she's been lovely, generous, funny, kind. Not what you would imagine from sort of the different films, and very supportive. So where it's at right now, she has someone who's working on the screenplay, and I'm consulting, and we're in contact. And Hollywood moves at a different pace. I mean, I'm much more go, go, go. I'm always moving in fifth gear. But, I really know she's going to do great things with it. So we'll see what happens. But it's in motion right now.
That's wonderful. Are you allowed to share with us who Sharon will be playing?
I cannot share
Okay, okay,
anything, but but you know, whatever she plays, she's gonna play it well.
oh yeah,
I'll tell you that.
for sure.
Yeah. But it's been sort of fun just kind of shooting, text, what about so and so? Or what about so and so? I mean,
Oh,
she's ultimately the decisions are hers. Um, but that's been kind of a fun part of it.
that's fantastic.
We have a list for you if you need a list of suggestions, because we did ask this question of who would we
I
cast.
know, I'm dying to hear it. You guys tell me. Yes. Yes, I'm gonna take notes. I want to hear. All right, who's your cast? Who's your cast?
I'm advocating for Kate Blanchett as Margot, but I mean,
Do you have a cast? I think,
Oh.
are we frozen?
oh no.
We're a little frozen.
Who are you advocating for?
Oh, I'm advocating for Kate
we're
Blanchett as
frozen.
Margot. I
Can you
feel like
hear?
that's a great move.
Maybe.
I think are you frozen?
Okay, is it working now?
There we go.
Yes, yes, you're good.
Okay.
You're good. Yes.
You want to share some of the options, Nikki?
I'm trying to remember what I even said at this point. I had some really good ideas, and now they're not coming to me when it's on the spot. But I know that there were a couple people who said that Jules, Anne Hathaway would be wonderful for Jules. I was trying to think of who we said for Ellis.
I think William H. Macy was thrown around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll have to send you a whole list, because we have comments.
I want the list. Yes, and if they use your people, I'll make sure you guys get credit.
I just want a set pass, and like I just want to come to the set one day and just say hi to everybody. That's all I want. But so we have one more like little question, and then we'll kind of open it up to some of the questions that were submitted, and feel free to let other people kind of jump in. But so we asked, what's something that you want to ask Lisa about the book? And so this is my personal one. So I want to know, is Margot truly dead? Also, spoiler alert, sorry. But you allude to it with her blood mixing with the canvas, but we never really get a complete, knot tied there of whether she truly perished.
Yes, Margot is dead, but obviously you see she has the last word. Her blood is on the painting, so that in a sense was the last word. And also, if you noticed all the bad things she did throughout the book, at the very end, she knew it was going to be the end of her, but she wanted to make sure her grandfather, who she loved, that his reputation stayed intact. So that was, I guess if you could call it that, her redeeming moment, in my mind, at writing it.
Right. Well, it looks like Michelle is putting some ideas in the chat for you for later, Lisa.
Okay.
I went on our Facebook page and I just copied and pasted from the thread of the conversation. So everybody's choices for characters are in the chat.
Okay. I love that.
All right. Well, I think our last formal question for you is, what are you working on now? What's next?
Yeah. So, I have a book that's due March 1st. So I've been crazy between book tour and writing and 3 kids and, the dog and everything. Every time I try to leave World War II, it pulls me back in. So I'm working on a book about a legendary Hollywood actress with a secret dark past during the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And so she may or may not have been an assassin back in her past, and in her film life that no one knows about her past, she's actually a femme fatale. So in the movies, but in real life, she was the same. So that is what I'm working on right now.
Well, that sounds great. I can't wait to read it.
I know. I'm like, sign me up.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So anyone who is here, if you have questions for Lisa, please unmute yourself, or you can put your question in the chat and we can relay it to her. If you are on Facebook, please put it in the chat and Michelle will take care of you and we'll get the questions answered.
Lisa, I had a hard time reading about Margot. It just seemed like, maybe there was going to be a redemptive line about her, but it just seemed like she got worse and worse and worse. And it was painful to read about her. Am I the only one that felt that way?
Right. Well, so maybe in my mind, she had, and as I said, the best evil characters, I believe, are those that do have something that you can empathize with. And I think you understood her past, which was, she was the poor little rich girl. She was really abandoned and neglected by her parents. And that the one person who she loved and loved her back was her grandfather that she lost at 12 years old. And so I believe in my mind as the writer that her redemptive quality was getting this painting back, that she wanted to keep it because it meant something to her. So many things in her life were destructive, but the painting was the one thing her grandfather loved. It was his ode to his wife Sylvie, who passed early. And so in my mind, there were, as you're saying, a lot of painful parts to Margot, but this aspect was something that redeemed her. You might beg to differ, and I respect that, but that's my intention as I was writing it.
Thank you. And I was so amused at Jules when she just burst into Dan's office. That just made my day. I thought, good for you, girl. You go.
Right. That's right. Thank you.
Back to Margot, wasn't there a part in the book that you alluded that she was schizophrenic or had some psychiatric
tendencies? Yes.
And she knew at one time, that she had this burning in her, and and so that separated her. So I that gave me some empathy for her, in that she did have these tendencies that she didn't know how to tame.
Yeah, exactly.
Though she was very difficult to believe that there is someone so evil and took advantage of others for their own purposes, the way she did. I mean, not that people don't do that all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think she under can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear? Okay. I think she knew, even when she was a little girl, and she would tell her grandfather things that he wanted to hear, because she understood that she was different from a young age, and that maybe she didn't have the heart that other people did. And, she realized her differences, and exactly as you described it.
Back to the art that was sold anonymously, was
Yeah.
there, like if the Art Museum of Chicago bought a piece at that time, was there providence to go back and find that piece and return it to the family?
You would think, um, uh, for example, the Louvre, I would say about 3 months ago, just returned 14 paintings that were hanging on their walls for 60, 70 years. And, and what happened was, um, between 1933 and 1945, if there was a wiped out provenance, as you mentioned, histories, those paintings are suspect. And as I mentioned, there were 600,000 works of art that had been stolen, confiscated, looted, and that were everywhere. There have been returns. There are hundreds of thousands of paintings that are still in major museums all over the world and hanging in private collections that their truth is just still waiting to be exposed. Those paintings that I mentioned earlier, that Gurlitt treasure trove of 1,500 paintings, in the midst of this scandal, he died, the old man died, and he bequeathed his artwork to this small, relatively unknown museum in Bern, Switzerland. It took them 9 years to return 40 works of art from the guy who was Hitler's art thief of handling these so-called degenerate artworks. So you have to wonder, there's 1,100 plus still left. How many of those histories still need to be exposed? It's a very slow process. And in fact, the Supreme Court just ruled on a case of one painting, a Pissarro, that a family had been fighting to get back in courts for 20 years. And they even had photos of this painting on their family's mantle with their relatives who were murdered by the Nazis in their home. They had it, they had everything. 20 years. And they just won their case, which was a major case for the stolen art world. In that treasure trove, again, of 1.5 billion dollars worth of artwork, I have a friend. Her family, her grandfather was the most prominent art dealer in Paris, and her sister rose to become sort of the Barbara Walters of Paris, and she became a bigwig in finance in New York. Anyway, with all the money that they had, it took her 9 years to get this Matisse that was in that collection worth $30 million back. 9 years, and this Matisse was hidden in the stove, as I have it in the book, layered like lasagna. So it is very, very difficult to get your stolen works of art. And mostly, and I'm just going to end my answer on this, is the Nazis were very savvy. They fabricated a line of history that didn't exist. Having, you're being pulled out of your home and they're asking, to go to the concentration camp, and they're asking you to sign over your artwork. You're going to sign over anything for the possibility of life. And so those types of things, they were very meticulous in their paperwork, which has really now, and in these court cases, that's what's being used against them, their own paperwork. So it's complicated, but it's a very big topic, especially now. If you read the New York Times, you'll see no less than 12 articles about this in the last 6 months, major, like front page articles on stolen art. And we're talking, this is 80 years after the war. So this subject is still ongoing. And really, it's now the great grandkids who are trying to get their relatives' artwork back at this point.
All right, so I have a question in the chat for you, Lisa. So would it be possible to
Yes.
talk about perspective? I feel like this was such a key insight to the novel. The perspective from Lillian that the painting was something that was cursed, Margot, who it represented her grandfather, Ellis, it was his mother, and his history versus Jules, who was an outsider and did not know anything about it, but it became something that she risked her life for.
Yes. Yes. So I think you hit it on the nose with, I mean, I think you just gave the explanation in your question. Each person had some connection to this painting. For Jules, it's the story, it's exposing the truth. You know, Adam, obviously his grandfather, Dan, Jules's boss, his connection to Ellis, and you know, as well, sort of having been the leader of like a spotlight team for his newspaper. So every one of them had motive to get this painting back. And I think what the real issue is that every one of them had a really strong connection to the painting. You know, obviously Ellis, it's his mother. It's his last connection to his mother. You know, Margot actually has the paperwork, the legal claim to this painting. And this is exactly what is happening in the stolen art world that everybody is showcasing. Say, for example, I ended up buying a painting and I think I'm getting this Chagall painting and not knowingly paying a lot of money for this painting, unknowingly this history that I think is okay. Is it my painting or does it belong to the grandkids of someone who really owned the painting that the painting was stolen from? It's so intricate. And, you know, if you're in the legal world, it's fascinating. And it's, you know, there's so many stories connected to each of these paintings that the heirs are trying to get back. It's not black and white. There's a lot of gray in this subject.
Thank you. We have time for just a couple more questions if anybody has anything else they want to ask Lisa.
I would ask you about addiction was a big part of the story. You know, the character Dan and Ellis were met in recovery. And then Ellis's
Right.
son was
Right.
addicted, and Margot used drugs to control, you know, used addiction to control the artists and others that she employed. So addiction seems to be a big part of the book. Did you mean it to be?
Well, obviously, you know, because I created the characters and, you know, with Dan and Ellis, that is where they developed their connection. And I think sometimes, you know, Dan, and you get sort of his backstory a little bit and what sort of led him in that direction. Ellis as well, you know, people who have secrets and dark past, it kind of, you know, came to that point. Yes, I meant it to be in the story. I meant, you know, Margot to know about these addictions and to control and to, you know, that her whole modus operandi was controlling people. And so I felt like the addiction played well into the various characters who were addicted or who had kicked their addiction, and also the relationships that might be developed between two people like Dan and Ellis, you know, dealing with something like that together. You know, two people that you would never put together in sort of outside of the addiction world. But, you know, it's an equalizer in terms of, you can be somebody, you could be, someone someone who's famous, someone who's not famous, someone who's a journalist, someone who's a high powered designer. It doesn't matter. Addiction is, levels the playing field for sure. And I wanted them to have that emotional connection, that there's a reason that Dan wasn't just going for this, going to get the painting back for the story. He wanted, where Ellis was sort of a father figure as well for him. So there was a lot of psychological baggage in this book, that everyone had. Some characters preyed upon that, like Margot. And so, yeah, it was intentional, to answer your question.
All right, I have one more question from the chat. So this person is curious about your decision, to have Ellis lose his eyesight before getting the painting back. What drove that decision?
So I knew that Ellis was, from the beginning, as I was planning, that he was never going to see it. But the work is expressionist art. So he was going to feel it. He was going to feel it. And that is really sort of the moral of that art piece. And so if you remember the scene, it was Jules on one side, his grandson Adam on the other side, describing, and he could smell it. He could remember his mother's hair when she brushed it, the color of it. So I took you from the top to the bottom, and Ellis was not going to see it, but he knew she was there in the room and was going to feel it. And that was in line with the expressionist work of art, expressionist movement of art. So that was a very, probably one of my earliest decisions as I wrote this, that was going to happen. I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to get there, but I knew that was going to happen.
Anything else?
Well, I would ask, do you think we'll get to see the piece of work, the artwork in the movie?
Yes.
Or will we still have
yes.
to imagine it?
You're going to see it. You'll see it. You'll see it. I promise you. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your, yeah. You were saying something.
No, after listening to you and the discussion, I'm anxious to go back and reread the book. And I will
okay.
probably
Thank you.
Enjoy it more the second time.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for reading the book. Thanks to both of you for putting it together, this lovely group. And if, you could follow me on Lisa Barr 18 on Instagram, or Lisa Barr Author on Facebook, if you kind of want to see what I'm doing, my journey. And, if you do write reviews and you enjoy the book, feel free. I love that. I welcome it. And spread the word. And I really appreciate your time. And I really love book clubs because you really can talk to the readers. Especially, this way I can meet you. Lucky we have Zoom. I can connect that way. But I really appreciate your time. And with all the choices, choosing my book, it means a lot. So thank you.
Thank you. We're so thrilled that you were able to join us. And I can't say enough nice things about how wonderful this book is. And I actually, Kelly and I just kind of compiled a list of things that sounded interesting. And once we read the synopsis of Women on Fire, I mean, we were like, this is it. This is the book we have to choose.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I'm just thinking, I'm at my laptop. Can I take a screenshot of the group and I'll send it to you guys? And I like to kind of post it in my stories and give you the credit in your group. Are you good with that? Should we do it?
I was actually going to suggest this too, Lisa. So we're the same breed right now.
All right, great. All right, I'm ready when you are. So how about on 3? 1, 2, 3. I got it.
Okay. I took a few too.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody. And
Absolutely.
have a great night. And thank you. I'll see you.
Thank you so much. We wish you all the best in all of your future endeavors.